Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Not D&D, which is brought to you by EN Live, part of EN World, the leading tabletop RPG news and reviews site. Thanks very much for coming along again to everyone watching. Please give me a big round of applause and say hello in the comments to welcome our guest, Andrew Peregrine. Hello, Andy. Thanks for coming along.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for having me.
No worries. If you could give yourself a little introduction for those of the audience members that might not know who you are.
Okay, well, that's fair because nobody really knows who I am.
I do.
It's I had my favourite thing I had many years ago. I was doing some work for Wright Publishing, and one of our editors looked at my back catalogue. I was amazed. Oh my God, I hadn't realised you'd written all this stuff. And his boss Steve just said to him, "Yeah, Andy's the most prolific writer you've never heard of." I thought that is brilliant. I want that on my tombstone.
There we go. All right, noted.
So yes, I'm Andy Peregrine. My main job is in the theatre, but I do freelance role-playing writing. At the moment, I'm the lead writer of Dune, which is awesome. Very excited about it. But in my time, I've done work for EN World on Judge Dredd, and for a lot of bits for Cubicle 7, and Ronin. And like pretty much any freelance writer, I've been around several different role-playing companies and been very lucky to do some really cool things.
Excellent. Well, that's a great thing. Well, today we're going to be talking about Dune, the name that I've been struggling to pronounce all week, because whenever I say Dune, everyone always stops me and says, what? And needs clarification. So, Andrew, as you've been working on it, what is the correct way to say this?
Well, as a dedicated Englishman, I call it Dune.
Dune, okay.
Dune. And I like to emphasise the U to it and feel the languid word that it is. But I believe a lot of Americans call it Dune.
Okay.
It's the tuna thing. Which I remember trying to order tuna on a pizza because that is one of my favourite things. Don't judge me. Don't you judge me.
I am completely judging you. Tuna on a pizza?
Yeah, tuna on pizza is brilliant. It's the way forward.
That's almost worse than pineapple. That's shocking.
Actually, to be fair, I like tuna and pineapple is my one of choice. So yeah, that's
wild.
Yeah, so we're not going to Pizza Express.
Okay, but let's not talk about that. Yeah, we won't get pizza together. But let's take us back to games where we were, as we were saying. So with games, obviously you like playing a lot of games. When did you start playing role-playing games? What was your first role-playing experience?
Well, it was, Russ won't believe me, but it was D&D, obviously. It was we joined in when I was about 11, which is a very long time ago now. We joined in the school D&D club, just started playing, and I was hooked. It was as simple as that. I mean, at the time, obviously D&D wasn't the only game out there, but it was still the one everyone got started on. And
as is similar now, to be honest, I think.
Yeah, it's actually, to be honest, I love that it's come back to being this huge thing, because when 4th edition came out and it dropped off, they upset a lot of people. The system was very different. There's a lot of things I really liked about 4th edition, but it didn't. It was a shame that it sort of D&D dropped down, and now I love that we've created 5th edition. It's a great system, and that it's brought D&D back into the public eye as well. Outside the industry, people are getting into D&D, and hopefully they can experience all role playing from this. But if they never play anything other than D&D, that's brilliant. So they're doing the hobby and bringing into it, and we're seeing this happen all over the place. So excellent. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say D&D was your first system, because we've had some conversations. So as Andrew mentioned, we've worked together before at EN Publishing, because he wrote the Robot Wars, the Judge Dredd line we used to have, and we were having some conversations about D&D, and you have some very strong opinions on it. And in the first episode of Not D&D, I made the joke. I said to Russ, "Why do we hate Dungeons and Dragons?" Because the name of the show makes it sound like that, and we explained that we actually don't. But I will say to you, Andrew, why do you hate Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, to be fair, it's Russ seemed to think I hate Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't at all. However, the one that really upset him was I said to him, "It's not a role-playing game."
Yeah.
He went, "That's what?"
Yeah.
You see people bristling already. I would usually describe D&D as this is why I'm never going to get to work for Wizards now. I would describe D&D as a small unit tactical war game that happens to lend itself exceptionally well to role playing. If you look at the system, and it's where it came from. I don't think D&D is ashamed of its roots. It was a battle
Yeah.
game that somebody went, you know what? If we just take a few of the smaller characters and we play them with personality rather than just, and they'll make the battles more fun. It'll get us more interested into things, and it was a brilliant idea. But the roots of that are still in the system. They're baked in a way that people would be upset if you got rid of them. For instance, if you have a scientist character, if you can find a scientist class, then you can't decide to not be good at combat. You will be as good as combat as a person of X level will be. You can't decide to spend those points anywhere else for a start, things like that. And there's a few cranky things that you get with any other old system, but I'm not going to blame it for that, because that's, they were still finding their feet in things. And newer systems have the advantage of building on the back of all the other games that have come before it. And I don't really want D&D to change. So yeah, that one I usually say to wind Russ up. But to be fair, I've been playing a Dragonlance campaign. It took me a very long time. We're still working our way through the final modules of Dragonlance because it was on my things. It's so I could also face Margaret Weiss at Gamers Conventions because she's lovely. And I didn't want to say, I've never played it. I've read your novels, haven't played the game. And I used to play, my biggest D&D things or biggest gaming things was when I was a teenager, because I am still and always was a horrible nerd, that my Friday night would be going around to my friend Moira's to play D&D from about 7:30 till midnight. And we would play D&D constantly through most of my teenage years. We were doing that. So yeah, I'm a big fan. We saw first into second edition and all that.
Well, there we go.
So,
we are but 10 minutes into the show and you're already creating controversy with the statement Dungeons & Dragons is not a role-playing game. So, people saying, I disagree, but Andrew's not wrong. We have other people saying, yeah, I kind of agree. So already creating controversy. However...
That's what I'm here for.
However, we are not going to spend any more time talking about Dungeons and Dragons because this is not D&D. This is a show where we talk about other tabletop RPGs.
And to be fair, this conversation is a lot more fun when I've got Russ to wind up.
He's here in the comments skulking somewhere.
Oh, I can feel the growling.
Great. But going back to RPGs that are not Dungeons and Dragons. So you played a lot of RPGs growing up, as you said. How did that transition to you working in RPGs?
It's a long, slow story. I used to write.
We have the time. That's what this is for.
Yeah, you know this. Me, I can go on all night.
This is why I invited you as a guest. You're just going to be able to talk. It's great.
So I fell in love with Call of Cthulhu. Was my first game I played from there. And once you're sort of inspired with, there are other games out there, I would then write little games myself, but usually there'd be versions of Call of Cthulhu, because again, a simpler system, you could just throw it together. We would play games for pretty much anyone. I think we'd play an Airwolf game, a Monkey game, pretty much any license, even The Prisoner, which I'm a big fan of The Prisoner. That one I tried to make a role-playing game of as well. I even had, maybe one day I'll do this again, a game called Ice Pirates. I have still never seen the film Ice Pirates, but I like the name, and I wrote a whole sort of setting with all the things you do when you're 16. So I had to put like lightsabers into it and flying spaceships because I'd just seen, flying galleons rather, because I'd just seen the episode of Doctor Who with that. Nice. So yeah, you throw in all the things that you love and see if it makes sort of sense. And so you've always been writing things. You make, as a DM, you make games, you make adventures. And one day you sit down and go, well, actually, could I send them to someone? Would anyone actually be interested in this? And I got in touch with, or at least got involved with a few playtest boards. So I was a big fan of the Buffy role-playing game, which was from, I can't remember now. But same ones do All Flesh Must Be Eaten and loads of other great games. And I was on their playtest board where you'd see, they'd put the books up in text form, and those of us who'd all signed on non-disclosure agreements would write bits and pieces about them and say, we like that, we didn't like that. Yeah. So, it was a great session for those things. And I remember seeing for the Monster book, they had Monster Smackdown. I mentioned, it'd be nice if there was a little section on vampire hunters, the humans who just do, not slayers and all the big important witches, but just the ordinary people because you see a few of those in the Buffy series. And the response I got back was, "Okay, do you want to write us 1,000 words on that?" What? Oh, yeah. Yes, I do. Okay. And so I read that, and it went in the book, and I was like,
Great.
"Oh my god, that's put my stuff in a book." This is so. I got chatting. You got chatting to other people. I got in touch with. It was Rob. I can't say. I've gone complete blank on people at the moment, but I got in touch with AEG about Seventh Sea because that remains one of my all-time favorite role-playing games. My
Okay.
general one, just to wind up Russ, is Seventh Sea is the greatest setting ever made. Pendragon is the greatest system ever made. I will fight people on most of those.
You will fight
And
people. Okay.
I will
All
fight
right.
people
I
on them.
won't
Yeah.
argue with you then. I'll just okay, fine. Yeah.
And yeah, so I sent them an email saying, how do I write for your game? Which, to be honest, is still basically the best way to get into the industry. Mail someone about a game you love and say, how do I do this? And they will often come back with, sometimes they'll say, we've got enough writers, we can't fit any people in.
Yeah.
But this one, they said, do me a little article, see what you like. And at this point, they needed, I think, a convention adventure. So they asked me to write it. This is all for free, by the way. You're trying to get your foot in the door. You have to do a certain amount of free work, but they don't usually
Okay.
do anything massively involved. It's not like writes a book and do that. But I did a little adventure for them that I think they used in conventions. I think it did see publication somewhere. And they went, "Oh, I like your style. You're good for the game." And I got some paid work from that. And it just, like all things, the more you've done, the more you can then say to other people, often at games conventions or when you
Yeah.
approach other companies, you can say, "Oh, I've done this," and they can look that up and go, "Oh, right, you've done some stuff." So then they know, mostly because what they want to know is not, are you a genius writer? Because there's plenty of genius writers out there. They mostly want to know that you can hit a deadline enough to get your work to happen, which is
Yeah.
one of the big things. It's the advice I usually give people is say, write what they asked you to write and turn it in on time. If you can do those two things, you have a great career ahead of you as a role playing writer.
Yeah.
If they want you to
As
write about dwarves, write about dwarves. Don't do elves or something because that's what you fancy doing. And turn it in on time and spell check it. Actually, that's the third one that shouldn't have to be said.
No, I mean, from a publisher's perspective, I'd say yes. If you have
Yeah.
a great writer, that's one thing. But somebody that actually hands things in on time is so important because the writing is only, from the publisher's perspective, the first kind of phase of making the whole book. And if that gets delayed, everything, rolls over.
And write something you love. Have fun with it because that will come off on the page every single time. If people have been bored while they've been writing, it reads boringly. And there's plenty of stuff out here to love. I can barely write for all the things that I want to write for. It's the joy of being a freelancer. I basically spend most of my time nagging people saying, "Wow, your game is awesome. How can I work on it?" And there's still plenty of things I haven't had a chance to get involved in that I would love to do.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, particularly, I missed out on the Sabbat book for Vampire. I've chased Vampire around several different companies. It's quite funny. Every time I get to work on it, it's one of my favorite games ever. Every time I get to work on it, it then moves companies. So I got to work for it with when they did the Vampire 20th anniversary game. And I believe they said they were only going to do like an anniversary thing, and were quite surprised that this turned into a game line all of a sudden because it was so popular. And I got, it's still one of my favorite emails. I got an email from Eddie Webb, who was running the game at the time, said, "We're doing a book on clans. Which are your favorite ones that you'd like to write for us?" Like, oh my god, I get to write up my favorite clans of Vampire. That's like the best thing ever. That was, incidentally, that was Tremere and La Sombra, and I ended up doing Nosferatu as well. But then, of course, just you think, right, I'm a vampire writer, I'm doing. Then it went to Modiphius and also Onyx Path. And then I got to write on Fall of London for Modiphius, because that was before we did Dune. And just I got, I'm in again. I'm in with the vampire thing. We're going to do so much more stuff. And now it's a Renegade. So, so I haven't got to nag them on that one yet. So yes, it's one of those things that I keep chasing around, but it's one of my favourite ones to do.
Excellent. Well, I think working in the games industry, because I'm in a non-creative role, from what you said, it sounds very similar, though, that once you get one job in the games industry, it kind of snowballs, because then people are like, oh, you can do this and you've done that. So it's getting your foot in the door, and getting that first thing is the most challenging part. But once you're there, it will kind of, and as long as you're a good person to work with, it's
it's the thing you have to remember. People have to remember as well. It is a small industry, and if you are a pain to people generally, word does get round. I mean, sometimes there are a few great writers or whatever that might be able to get away with it, and they'll have a great name. But generally, if you've upset one company by turning everything in late, or always demanding more money, or doing bad work or something, people will hear about it because people talk, and it's one of those
gossip,
things that I find quite funny. Is there are things I will hear at one company, and then I go, oh, because as you freelance, you hear a lot of different things, and of course you can't. You have to remember, although these are all your friends, you can't. I can't share things I hear at Cubicle 7 with things I hear at Modiphius, and vice versa. They're all actually different companies, but every now and again, I will be sitting on something. I think, oh, this is big, and then one of the other people say, oh yes, I've heard they've got that. It's like, how do you know? I'm working on it, and so word get round in this company, and also that works the other way around. That if you get known as someone who's done stuff, so there are people who you've never met may well say, oh yeah, I've been wondering if I could get you on a project, and you're like, you've heard of me. So sometimes it works. I mean, as you were saying before about no one ever having heard of me, it seems that enough people have heard in the games industry, so I still get the work. It doesn't really matter what your personal family. I love doing these things, great, but there's not a queue of people wanting my expert celebrity opinion on anything.
well, we do. That's why we invited you here.
Yeah, that's why until Dune.
Talk about Dune,
but
yes.
It's lovely. It's lovely too, because I love doing these things. But I'm not really a big celebrity. Some other games people are. And you worry sometimes, is that the thing? Do I need to have more of a celebrity profile to get more work? And actually, it turns out not, because what is nice in this industry is the work will out. If you've worked on good books, because we're all reading the same books. I know that it's not the companies going, oh, I don't know what this role playing is, we just make it. They all love it. They're all reading each other's stuff. People are spending all their time looking at each other's games, going, wow, your game is awesome, I've read everything. And so if you then say, oh, I worked on this, they go, oh, right, we should get you on our project because we like what we read in that one. So it does work in the end. It does, yeah.
There we go. Well, I have put a very big picture on the screen of the book that we are here to talk about, and the project that you're currently or have been working on. We're talking about Dune. So talk to us a little bit about how are you involved with that? What was your role in making this product? This game?
Well, this is one of those dream projects. It's been a thing I've been wanting to do for a while. Is to head up something, a really big license thing. I never imagined for a minute it would be something the size of Dune. When I heard that Modiphius had got hold of it, I just nagged Chris Birch incessantly and said, yeah, can I do something, anything? And here I am, strangely sitting here as the lead writer for it. So it's ended up, I was started off with sort of managing bits of the project, and we did various bits and pieces through it. There's a long, convoluted story of bits and pieces going on in the background. But essentially, my job is the most awesome job you could ever have on this, is that I develop the content, what's going to be in the books. I parcel out the writing to the various writers that I have. I've got an amazing team of writers. And also, I should add, because again, it's the backstage part, art design, art directors, graphic design, layout. They have knocked it out of the park on this game. They are absolutely phenomenal. And so I get to sort of decide what's going to be in these books, and obviously pass it through Modiphius' senior management and everything, and see what they like. But thankfully, they've liked what I've been putting together so far. And then we produce these books, and I get to pick my favourite bits to write as well, because I'm the first one to make the decision. Although that is the hardest part. There are many things I've looked at and go, oh, I want to write this bit up. And I have to sort of look and go, no, I've got to give that to someone else, because if I sit and write that, it takes away time from doing some of the development and organising and bits and pieces that I have to do. So you sort of go, Yeah, I haven't got time to write that one because I might have to be reading this or developing that, so I have to hand that on to somebody else who sort of looks at it and goes, "You gave me this. I thought you'd be doing that one." No, I want to, but I can't. But uh, but most of the Talaxi was written by me in this one because they're my favourites, and
Hmm.
and I hold that one. That's my
So you're kind of the
yeah,
lead writer on it. So you're kind
yeah,
of, this is all your fault, really, is in a way what you're
yeah.
saying.
Pretty, I mean, it's. I could probably blame other people, but I ought to carry the can
Okay.
myself. You know, I ought to put my hand up and say I'm charged. But no, we're very pleased with this book. It's a. I mean, obviously, this is the time to do Dune. So if people
Hmm.
haven't seen the recent movie, or I'm not sure how they might not have heard of it, but go and
Yeah.
check it out. It is phenomenal. I'm a
Yeah.
massive fan of the movie. It's just better than I expected, and I was
Yeah.
expecting a lot. And this is the official game based on
Hmm.
the books rather than the movie. So we always go back to the
Okay.
original Frank Herbert novels.
Right.
And to give an idea of the setting to those who don't know Dune, it's a
Hmm.
wonderful thing because it's effectively kind of the Lord of the Rings of the science fiction era. It's one of those
Hmm.
big foundational novels.
Yes.
And what makes it particularly interesting as a sci-fi setting is that it doesn't have any of the things you'd expect in a sci-fi setting. It doesn't have ships that fly at warp speed across between planets. It
Yeah.
doesn't have any robots. It certainly doesn't have computers, because the setting is that in probably about another 10,000 years from now, humanity fights against artificial intelligence. The machines
Hmm.
basically try and take over. And after a long fight that we only barely win, humanity does prevail. But after this, they decide, well, clearly artificial intelligence did not go well for us. So they put an utter ban, almost a religious ban, on
Hmm.
all computers and what they call thinking machines. But of course, it's very difficult to get around with computers. They're working out all the stuff for navigating across space and all the other bits and pieces they do.
Yeah.
So over the next 10,000 years, humanity starts to develop and evolve into something new. So you have human beings who have minds like computers. You can remember every fact you've ever known, and you can process and calculate, sometimes even predicting the future. There are also humans who are mutated by a particular drug, the spice, which we come back to.
Hmm.
They can use their mind to predict the safe path through space for the spacecraft they use, which can
Hmm.
fold space and move across from one planet to another almost instantly. And there are all these shadowy organisations, like one of my favourites, the Bene Gesserit, which is a sisterhood entirely made
Hmm.
of women, who have been guiding humanity behind the scenes with a sort of special breeding plan to make sure they're working towards a super being, because they themselves have practiced an incredible selection of training in how to make the most of their body and their physicality. So they are lethal fighters. They have got utter control over the science and the chemistry of their bodies to do what they want to do with it. And then the peak of what it is to be human. So there are all manner of weird special abilities people have got,
Yeah.
but there's no magic in this game. But some bits that feel a bit magic, and the technology is kind of hidden because it is so advanced. It's just sitting in the background.
Hmm.
Yet you have these spacecraft, and you have feudal
Yeah.
houses, where it's broken into now as well.
Hmm.
Various different noble houses control various parts of the universe in what is effectively a trade empire rather than a
Yeah.
sort of nice empire of a king. I mean, there is an emperor thing, but everything is based on who is making money out of trade, effectively. And
Hmm.
the most vital thing in the universe is the spice. A substance that is found on only one planet in the entire universe, and it's a horrible, unpleasant desert world. It's too hot for anyone.
Yes.
Nobody wants to live there, and it's the world called Dune. And in this place, the spice that they mine from it is wanted by everyone, because
Yeah.
not only does it allow these guild navigators to take spacecraft across these vast interstellar distances, but it
Hmm.
also can let you live longer. And if you can just take this sort of weird drug that also gives some people visions and all kinds of things, but just on the basic level, people want to take this thing that gives them a few more years of life. It's, as you can imagine, quite popular. So
Yeah.
whoever controls Arrakis controls the universe, and the politics around who is in control of the universe from and who has the power over the spice is the story that's going to play out over the novels and the films,
Yeah.
and in our book. So we set the book itself is set just before effectively the first novel, so just before the movie.
Hmm.
And this one gives you the opportunity to play as characters in one of the noble houses. You create your own noble house because there are
Okay.
loads of these different houses.
Yes.
And it was very important to us to not just go, oh, you start as a minor nothing house and you build your way up. You can do that, but I'm a big fan of going, if the NPCs can have it, the players should have it. So in
Okay.
this one, if you want to play a house that controls 4 different planets, that is one of the greatest, most important houses in the Imperium, that's all yours as well. The balance is that you'll have a lot of enemies and a lot of stuff, people wanting to take it away from you. So
Yeah.
think on your level carefully before you begin. And all of your players in the game are elite agents of that house. So you're the go-to guys who are part of that house. You're loyal to that house, so you know you can trust each other for the most part, at least.
Yeah.
And you might have come from all kinds of different backgrounds. So we've got all the iconic characters. You can play Fremen, guild agents, play Bene Gesserit, and all kinds of bits and pieces. So you've got all manner of different cool characters to play. But if you don't play any of those, there's still all manner of cool options for you to play as a character,
Yeah.
because you are the fixers of your house. So you
Yeah.
go out and do what keeps what they need done, and adventure in the Imperium, basically.
So we've got a couple of the characters on the screen here. So can you
Yeah.
talk us through what we're looking at here? We've got some very
Yeah.
cool looking
So
people.
we've got I mean, I cannot over oversell the art that we have for this game. We had our art director and all the artists just done awesome work. Look, it's a joy to look through this book. I say that as someone with no artistic ability whatsoever. So
But
I have
artistic
to be,
appreciation, yeah.
yes. Well, the appreciation I can do but it's kind of a problem in this one because I'm meant to be critical of these pieces of art. I'm meant to look at them and spot canon issues or problems and make sure they are what we need. And 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, I will open a file with the new art that we've got, and I'll just go, wow. And it's very hard to be objective. It's very hard to go, let me look at what's wrong with this. I can't find
Yeah,
it.
when you're being
I
such a
can't
fan about it,
I
yeah.
just keep going, oh my God, that looks amazing. So what we have on this one is the guild agent these are all what we call faction characters. So they're people who have got another allegiance outside their house, although they
Okay.
have pledged themselves to your house.
Okay.
So guild agents are members of the Spacing Guild. They are not necessarily people flying the ships, although some of them could be pilots. The guild does a lot of banking, but they have connections to all the trade and the movement of goods across the universe as well.
Okay.
And of course, on the right, you have the Fremen, who are the desert warriors who are going to be engaged by House Atreides and become some of the most fearsome fighters in the universe. But at the moment are a group of random desert people that nobody quite knows very well, who have been hidden away in the deep deserts of Arrakis, places nobody able to do. And it's one of the things I love. They're the people that truly understand Dune and Arrakis, and it's one of the things I wanted to write into the book as we were going, that it's for the outsiders, it is a hellhole of just desert and sand and heat and things. But I've also always been a fan of deserts themselves, and when you see the sun sunsetting over behind the dunes and the way the shadows shift as the dunes go on the end, and the colours and all kinds of things, there's a beauty in the desert. And the Fremen are the only people that get that, and they're seeing all these people coming to this planet just for spice and just to mine stuff and complain how hot it is. And none of them really appreciate what it is they're taking or stealing from what is actually quite a beautiful place, if only they would see it in the right way.
Well, there we go. So that's kind of the Fremen there. And we have another bunch of character art here as well. So if you could talk us through these kind of characters and those roles you mentioned, are they so you can play those roles in the game as a character?
Yes, absolutely. What you do with these is, if you want to take a faction character, which is one of these 5, then you simply break up your character just the same as anybody else. There are just a few things that you have to take to make sure you have the right skills. But you still have a lot of variety. So you don't actually gain any more or less power than because sometimes you see these things. Like, say, if you want to play Star Wars, it's very difficult to play a Jedi and not be a little bit further ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
These things, because you have access to things that the others don't have. These faction characters do have some really extra cool powers, but there's enough cool stuff for everybody else as well. So it doesn't unbalance the game if everyone wants to play these all different things. So we've got on the left, you have the Super Doctor, and these are the people who they have a diamond tattoo on their forehead that marks them having had what they call imperial conditioning, which means they are incapable of hurting people that they treat, or anyone really, which makes them the perfect people to serve the nobility, who are horrifically paranoid. People are poisoning, assassinating, all kinds of different things
Yes.
in this one. So when it comes to medical matters, you want a doctor you can absolutely trust. So these are not only the best doctors in the universe, but also they are the most trusted doctors in the universe. That makes them profoundly useful.
Hmm.
Then in the middle you have a mentat, in this case a Harkonnen mentat from House Harkonnen. You can see from the sigil on the chest there.
Hmm.
What the mentats can do, they're the human computers. They can process, they can
Okay.
remember stuff, and they become their advisors to their houses. So if you want any memory, anything remembered or recorded, figures for your mining, how your trade thing was going, they remember everything. Baseball card statistics, whatever you like. There's the amount of gigabytes of data that a human brain can hold is way more than anything we have these days. And also because it's a human mind, they can recall this information and they can mix
Yeah.
and matching, and they can calculate things from it. They can notice, oh, your trade figures there were down there, but if you looked at the other house's trade figures, I've noticed a correlation. Maybe they're stealing our stuff. So they are got very powerful mental characters. And
Hmm.
then the last ones are the Bene Gesserit, the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, a secretive group of all-women faction who have studied the human body to the level that they are at the apex of their physicality. They have all manner of weird powers, but because they're a secretive order, they are generally not trusted by people.
Yeah.
Everyone
Fair
wants, as
enough.
usual with these things, everyone wants. The patriarchy is sadly strong in Dune, and it's one of the things one of the reasons the Bene Gesserit are very powerful, because everyone worries about what power they have, but they can't do without their ability. They can detect lies.
Hmm.
They have got their claws into pretty much every aspect of imperial life. We're trying to steer away in the game of making sure not every woman is connected to the Bene Gesserit, because that becomes a little bit silly.
Yeah.
But and of course, some women aren't interested in becoming that. But if they find useful, talented women, they
Hmm.
end up part of the Bene Gesserit. They know talent where they see it, and because of that, they've worked in the shadows and to serve their agenda, and they're fascinating people. So so there are lots of cool characters to play in this game.
That sounds good. So you kind
Mm.
of set up your house and you choose everything and you
Yeah.
choose your characters to kind of be.
Mm.
So what else does kind of the books contain? So does it, what sort of
Mm.
adventures? How do you structure a game like this? Because obviously the world is so
Mm.
massive.
Yes.
I would, as GM, I'd be so intimidated to kind of approach it.
It is. It's a tricky one, because there are a lot. You've got, even over the novels, there's sort of this section. Then it works in like 10,000-year blocks. So the first thing we did was bring all of this canon material into different
Hmm.
eras. And the one we're
Okay.
focusing on to start with is this one we call the Imperium, which is set just before the novel.
Hmm.
So you've got this time of feuding houses and noble backstabbing and politics.
Yeah.
We've also got the system does things in a very narrative way. So
Hmm.
you're also focused with, I mean, essentially for each game, what makes adventures easier is the boss of your house says, I want you guys to go and sort this out. That might be a problem with trade on Arrakis. It might be they think
Hmm.
there's an information leak in their house. It could be that there's an enemy that's resurfaced that someone wants you to do something about, but not let people know it's you. And all the same things that you might see with any sort of mixture of politics
Hmm.
and general adventure game, because you've got the whole universe to visit and
Of
explore if you
course.
want to.
Yeah.
Although we did pare it down a bit start, we set everything initially on Arrakis. So
Okay.
it's called Dune for a reason, is what we usually thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of Arrakis. I usually described it, our vision of this is Casablanca in space. It's
Casablanca
kind
in
of like, yeah,
space. What a tagline!
exactly. Brilliant. So you've got this place, there's lots of different political factions here. This is where the spice
Yeah.
comes from. So
Okay.
even if people start just saying, oh, Arrakis, yes, it's a backwater planet, I'm not interested. I just buy spice. I don't, I'm not interested. Every house wants more spice. Every
Hmm.
house wants to figure a
It's the
way to
thing.
get their claws
Yeah.
into something, to get a better deal, to get some smugglers to funnel some stuff to them. So everyone's got an interest on this base, and everyone's trying to tell you that they've got no interest there at all because it's a bad thing. So the politics are immense here. And there's so much to explore. There are secrets on Arrakis. There are all the things the Fremen know about what's really going on the planet and how that works. So there are mysteries, there's adventure, there's politics, there's everything that's sitting here. And that's just one planet. And as we go through the game, we have more books on the way with that. We're going to start expanding out into the rest of the Imperium. So you can go to other people's planets and start messing around with their issues and problems. Houses can come into conflict and all kinds of other bits and pieces can get going.
Expanding the universe over time.
Yeah.
Exciting. We have a question from Steph, which is, do you have a favourite house in the Dune universe, or the Duneverse, if you please?
Yes.
They have asked.
Oh, it's a tricky one. It's tricky because my favourite section in the Dune universe is the Chilaxu, the Face Dancers, faction that we're going to be bringing in quite soon. I think they have these really cool characters who can change their face completely to look like anyone they like, which is really cool ability. And they're just, I'm always drawn to the evil ones because the Tlaxu are just not to be trusted. They are deeply they're biologists, and they're really twisted, unpleasant. They will do anything for their science. There's some horrific things they do, but they're also, I found them quite cool as well. So they are these weird bits and pieces. So I'm a big fan of Romulans and Star Trek. It's the same sort of thing. But also in terms of houses, some of the ones I like to, the ones I can't necessarily mention, but we've got a book coming up that will have a lot of different houses in those. And some of those have become my favourites. There's some we've been allowed to create. So there'll be a whole host of different ones. But I've also got, because our next thing out is Agents of Dune, which is this big box set, big starter box set. So you can learn as you play, just open up the box and get stuck in right away on it. And that one, we've got the pre-generated house and characters for that one, is House Nagara, which obviously, having spent a lot of time working on this box set, I think House Nagara have become one of my favourites because they've got this cool wolf symbol, and there are guys for this one as well. So yeah, that's where pretty much one. But they're all cool, all the houses. Although at the same time, it's like it's one of the problems we have in Dune. There's not really any good guys in it. So even people like the Atreides, who are the good, honest people, they've got some skeletons in their closets. There's things they don't do that aren't so good. They're not as bad as the Harkonnen, but there are. It's very difficult to entirely root for what someone in Dune, which is kind of the joy of it, because everyone's got. I find it a little more real if everyone's got an agenda. It's not about who's good or bad. It's about what do people want to do. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a bad thing. But that makes them a little more interesting and believable, I would think.
Definitely. And what are the means to achieve that end that they're willing to do? And
exactly.
Yes. Well, Steph said they're a fan of House Harkonnen there as well. So we'll read into that. As
you can't go wrong with the baddies as well. I mean, it's again, one of the things I love with Dune is that the Harkonnen could be these horrible pantomime villains if they're just baddies. But the Baron Harkonnen, despite the fact he's this almost caricature, huge, corpulent guy who's just brutal and horrible, he's clever. He's really clever. He's worked out this whole plan to take down other houses and possibly even take control of the Empire. So it's often you sort of write off the evil characters as if, they're just going to be evil. But when they're intelligent as well, it's so much more. He's the full-on Darth Sidious in the background as well as that. So
an intelligent villain is a great thing.
Yeah, it's hard not to like them in some ways as well. You've got to at least respect them.
It's good writing if you can make people empathize with what they're doing. Not that they agree with the evil deeds they're doing, but feel like I get why you were driven to this point where you are in this place. I think that's always really good writing in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have any questions for Andrew, please write it in the comments now. So get stuck and involved if you're asking about the games now. So we're talking about Dune. So with as you mentioned, the role-playing game, it's the official role-playing game, and you've basically used the books mostly as the reference. But I think a lot of people, and I'm one of them, have come into the Dune universe from the films, because I haven't read the books. It wasn't so. how are the books for if you've just perhaps watched the film, found that really interesting, and are wanting to give it a go with the role playing game? What's that? Would that work as well, or?
Absolutely work. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is one of the things it's always where you come into a property like this, you know that you're going to have, particularly when there's a big film coming out, you're going to have two different types of customer. You're going to have the customers who have gone, oh yeah, I've loved Dune all my life, books, give me Dune. And you're going to have people who have gone, well, I've seen the movie and some of it didn't make a lot of sense, but I'm interested. So what do I do? So you want to create a book where the people who know the setting can take what you've done and go where they want to go.
Yeah.
But also you don't put so much stuff in that people who are new to it, who have just, say, for instance, see the movie or just read the first book, go, oh God, it just looks too complicated.
Yeah.
So we've got a big detail on the setting in the core rule book, you know, a good chunk of it to read through, which hopefully will make sense of a few things. I mean, for instance, there are things that you don't see till later books. So the Chilaxu, my favourites, they don't turn up till Dune Messiah, which is the second book of the Dune series. So it's going to be at least another movie's worth before they turn up for where people who are just watching the movies have seen them. And you always hope, as a big reader myself, you always hope that, and I think this is true, that the movie will inspire people to read the books, and maybe the role-playing game will inspire people to read the books and get back and forth there. Because again, 100%. The books are always where it's going to be. But yeah, we've condensed everything into that, and we've also tried to make sure that we give adventures and the like. There's an adventure in the back of the book. Obviously, we've got PDF adventures. We've got a quick start guide you can pull free off the Bitifius website as well. And all those things are designed to give you just try and pull down everything into a smaller bite-sized chunk. So you can just take a little bit of Dune and then figure that out, and then take another bite and then figure out how that goes. And gradually, after a while, you suddenly realize you've got the whole of the known universe at your feet. But to give you enough so it's not completely overwhelming at the start. But also give you something where you can look at the cool parts. We haven't gone, oh, well, there are some cool things we won't do. I mean, obviously, we've had to save some things. So we've saved the Chilaxu for a little bit later. We've also saved these ones that people are always mentioning because they're big fan favorites, is the Ginaz Swordmasters, who are literally the best swordsmen in the universe.
Oh, really?
Unfortunately, to become one, you have to train on their planet for about 5 years. And when you do that training, when you finish that, you are then one of the greatest. If you survive, you are one of the best swordsmen ever. So it's kind of like, if in D&D terms, I know we're not D&D, but it's quite helpful to say, so we're all about 5th level. Oh, Bob, your guys really impressed them with your potential for swordsman things. So what we're going to do is we're going to pause the campaign for five years, and you're going to come back as 20th level while everyone else is about 10th. How does that sound to everyone? Oh, it's a little bit trickier to work in. So we save them for later, but we're bringing them in with some of the more high-level advanced characters, because although you are the agent, the elite agents of your house in this one, we are then looking to move up the game to higher levels where you might be the ones who control your house later on, or you're the people who are the elite agents of possibly even the emperor or anything like that. So there's always an extra level to go up to in Dune, and that's where some of these really cool, powerful characters can come in as well.
Awesome. So speaking of, we talked a lot about the setting, the characters you can play. What's the system? So what powers the game? How do you play mechanically?
So this one is the 2D20 system, which is Modiphius's house system. And I'm a little reticent to call it house system, although it kind of is, because I remember the days you'll have people go, oh, a house system. I remember the days of the 80s, which wasn't necessarily that bad, where a lot of games companies had their house system, and anything that they had, they would crowbar any license they got into that house system. It had to be done that way. Now, a lot of these systems, they still worked, but you're also thinking it wasn't quite as we do a lot today, where a lot of the time you take your license and then you go your setting and go, what is the best system and how do I use the system for it? But of course, they did have the advantage of you always got to this game and you know what the rules were, and you had a system that you tried and tested. So what Modiphius have done, and I think it's the best way around, the 2D20 system is always, for every single game, used for every game. The same one as you find for Conan, Star Trek, Dishonored, Homeworld, all of them have the 2D20 system, but they're all a little bit different. They've all taken the base core rules and then gone, right, and now how do I make that fit the setting? So you can pick up you'll find this when you chat to Jim about Star Trek. You'll
Yes.
find that the basics will be the same, but they will also then go off in a different tangent. So the core rule for pretty much all of these is that your character will have two particular attributes. In Dune, we have drives and skills, but they are different
Okay.
for Conan, and Star Trek have different ones.
Mm-hmm.
Those two, you add them up and roll a pile of d20, and whichever any of those d20 that roll lower than your combined attribute score are a success. More
Okay.
successes, the better. You always start a dice pool with 2d20, hence the title, and you can spend points to buy up more dice until you reach about 5d20 in your pool is the maximum. And there are a few little extra things, like if you roll a 1, you get 2 successes for that dice, and there are things you can do with focuses and other bits and pieces to give you extra successes. And the more successes you get, the better you've done. Do you beat a difficulty number, which is a set of how many successes you need to get, and if you have, you've succeeded. And along the way, you can gain complications and all kinds of tweaks and fiddles. What I particularly like with this system, the two, because I do a section on games systems I really like. So I've done one on 2d20 because there are some really good parts of this one. And one of the things you do, your bonus points, your sort of, most games have got some beanie points, bonus points, hero point type things. In 2d20, if you get more successes than you need, those become what they call momentum points.
Okay.
And those can be spent on subsequent dice rolls to buy more dice or lower difficulties or throw narrative aspects into the game. So one of the things I like, you can spend them and go, oh, one of our enemies has turned up for things like this, or I have got a knife that they didn't take off me when they searched us before we came in. So there's lots of little tweaks and things you do. They're a narrative aid, which is also good. And it also means that the better you do on the dice rolls, the more of these points you can acquire, and then you spend them and you can acquire more points. It's a bit of a gear change, I think, for a lot of people in systems where you're used to hoarding these points. Used to going, we'll save these for the big dice roll. And actually it works, in my experience anyway, I've discovered it works a lot better if you spend these points, to get more dice pretty much every time you go. Because if you do well, you'll keep building your pool up. And there's a maximum to the pool, which is quite a nice touch. So there comes a point where you go, well, if we can't get any more, we should spend some of these, or we're going to gain nothing from a good roll. And it basically represents when your players are doing well and they're on a roll, they gain momentum in what they're doing. So it all fits together quite nicely.
Excellent. From what that all makes sense. It's good to know that it's got the basic 2d20 system, but it's been tweaked so it fits the exact scenario that it is. From what we've been talking about, it sounds a lot like for the core book, it's really designed to be great for kind of campaigns. So you're setting up your house and you're kind of going on for that. But somebody has asked if it's possible to run the game as a one shot, and are there story modules for like a one shot or something like that planned for the Dune setting?
So we usually approach everything we do as because we know that times have changed. Often people don't often sit down and play one campaign and then people are often playing little bits. So pretty much every adventure we do, we've got a couple out now. There's my Desert Fall and there's Rachel's Time is a Narrow Doorway we've got out, plus the Worm Sign and Adventure in the back of the book. We have tried to fit them together so that they're in a similar setting so that you can play them one after the other and they follow on in waves. So if you want to have a ready-made campaign, you can dive in that way. But any of them can be just picked up and go, let's just play an adventure. So they have beginning, middle, end. And if you want to take it on, carry on later, you can. If you're not so keen, you can pick something else up. But I'm imagining that a lot of people play the way that I myself tend to play. We'll do a couple of adventures of a system, and then another cool thing will come along, and we'll go, oh, we want to try that one, and then we'll come back to this. So you keep the same characters, and just when somebody next wants to run some Dune, you have another adventure going and carry on. That works very well. But you can just go one shot, and like you can, I think, to be honest, with most games, you can play your one-off adventure and then carry on through. So, pick it up if you want to for that one later on.
Sounds great. So hopefully that answers your question, Steph. Yes, it is certainly possible to run the game as a one shot. For me, I think it sounds like it would shine really well as a campaign though, because then you can build up your house, and then there's long standing kind of political dramas and things you can weave into the narrative, and it seems like that sort of settings. It's kind of very Game of Thrones in space sort of style.
Yes, very. That's a very good option for it. you've got. I mean, we'd argue actually Game of Thrones probably drew from Dune as well because so many things do. Uh,
Well,
but
yes, yeah.
yeah, and what we've done as well is one of the things that I think makes the game interesting is when it comes to combat, we've called it conflict, Rob. So we have
Okay.
what looks initially. It's one of the things that people find a bit scary in the rulebook. It looks initially like we've got 5 different systems for combat because
Oh,
we have
really?
the
Okay.
dueling, which is obviously big. Dueling is one-on-one because they have a lot of that in Dune. Skirmish
Okay.
is obviously your standard combat fight.
Mm-hmm.
Espionage when you're trying to get secrets from each other. Intrigue when you're just trying to mess each other's reputation up.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, warfare when you're taking on great battle tanks and things. And it looks initially,
Okay.
oh, there's a different section for each. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, what we've done is we use the same system for all of them.
Okay.
So
How
the
does that
section,
work?
so, essentially, you're rolling pretty much an opposed roll against your enemies,
Mm-hmm.
and if you win the roll, you defeat them. And
Okay.
it's done very simply that way. So we work it out as you are having to defeat your enemy, but you
Mm-hmm.
determine what defeat might mean at the start of your session. Now,
Okay.
a lot of the mix and match within that is the movement from assets. So what you're looking to do is move your assets. So in the case of warfare, this might be tanks and soldiers. In the
Mm-hmm.
case of a duel, it might be your blade into the guard zones of your opponent. And you move these assets backwards and forwards in a very tactical way until you can get your knife or your soldiers or your reputation or your blackmail well,
Yeah.
into the right place to make a strike against your enemy. And then in
Mm-hmm.
one dice roll, you've either taken them down or you haven't. So it's a lot of sort of movement and tactical things, and then it's all over very quickly in the moment. So you can then stretch that as much or as little as you like. So if you go, actually, I don't want to play out a big duel. Let's just
Mm-hmm.
roll and see who wins. Bang, you won. Because things
Yeah.
do turn on a coin very quickly in Dune, and it's also a
Mm-hmm.
very brutal world. You can
Yeah.
lose a duel and that's it, you're out, or lose a war.
Okay.
So all of the conflict types we have in this are basically reskins of the same basic system, which means that if you've got the basics, you can then do political things, war games, duels. It all
Mm-hmm.
fits together in the same way because a lot of games will do. Oh, we need a no different social system for this, and then we need a battle system, and then
Yeah.
and it would just get very complicated very quickly. So we've tried to make that all work in the same way and your characters can work from a distance by sort of being the what we call architects. So you can be ordering your assets in from afar, or you can be the boots on the ground, the guys inside the fight or the battle, or
Mm-hmm.
the salon where you're trying to destroy reputations, and be the agents that way around. So we've also got a
Okay.
distance thing. So there's a lot of different ways to play the game that you're going to find very possibly a bit of a gear change from usually just going into the adventure things. You can very much play the puppet masters in this. The
Yeah.
characters sitting. You could indeed even play the game where your characters themselves never actually leave the room. They all sit around a boardroom
Oh
discussing,
well.
and you are using assets and moving your pieces and your pawns and your knights across the universal chessboard of the Imperium to achieve the ends of the adventure.
Okay. So
Um,
your character doesn't have
yeah.
to have any combat skill at all. And
Well,
just.
you would take your battle skill,
Mm-hmm.
which might be how good you are with a blade, but it might also be how good you are at sending tanks into the right place in a warfare. So it's very pulled down. We have, as we come back to these 2 sets of attributes, we have
Mm-hmm.
the drives that are your faith or power. It's why are you doing what you're doing? What is driving your character to try and achieve this objective? And
Mm-hmm.
then we have battle, communicate, discipline as skills, and those are all the skills you need are the 5 that we have for those.
Okay.
So everything defaults to those. So you haven't got this long line of different skills. Oh, I'm good at herbalism and things. That will all come
Mm-hmm.
under your understanding. And you might have focuses in different things to give your characters different edges in different places. So there's a lot of it's a very narrative game. So
Yeah.
you will find there's a couple of places if D&D is in your previous thing, you
Yeah.
may find it a little bit taking away some of the things you're used to and going, oh, hang on, don't I
Mm-hmm.
just roll for initiative and I fight him? Or do I just make
Yeah.
a skill? There's a little more thought here about why you're doing what you're doing and how your character's going to go about it and what they're going to do with all their cool stuff and how they're going to apply it. But the payoff for that is that you can add so much more to the narrative. You don't just
Yeah.
say what your skill is doing. You say how you're coming about it, what contacts you're manipulating to get there. Once you get into it, there's a lot of story that you can add and build into the game from the players, not just listening to the GM and what they say, describe and ask you, and now roll that dice. This is the GM coming to the players and saying, what are you going to do? There's that enemy has walked into the room. What are you going to do about it? And what are you going to use to do about it? And then it's entirely up to you to look at what you've got available to you and how you're going to do about it. And it all can come from the players, which can, I appreciate, be a little daunting sometimes, but that's why we've got a huge, thick rule book to give you all of the structure and options and things for you to go, oh, right, I don't quite know how I'm going to start, but I've got this and this and this. Let's see and I know what they do. Let's see what I can do with that. So you don't have to know everything in intimate detail, but it's a case of using the tools you have to try and apply to the situation that you've got. So
sounds very interesting. Yeah. Well, we are coming up near to the top of the hour. So if you have any questions for Andrew about Dune or any of the other projects he's worked on, actually, that you may know, feel free to put them in the chat and we will ask them now. But yeah, thank you. That's a really good summary of the system. And it's something I'm quite excited about. I haven't read the books, but I've seen the films and it's a really interesting world. And I do enjoy a game that has a lot of kind of intrigue and kind of political maneuverings and plotting. So it does sound like more my sort of thing, really.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing we focused on, because again, there are fights. I mean, you've seen already the film. There are fights and actions, but there's also intrigue and politics going on, which is all my favourite stuff as well. You know, as I say, it come back to the Romulans again. You know, I love the devious manipulators in the background, and you know, I always like to have a system that will let me do that sort of thing with it.
Yeah. So apart from Dune and not D&D, what are your kind of favorite RPGs that you like to play or that you're playing at the moment?
Oh, so many things. At the moment, I'm actually there's so many cool things. At the moment, I'm actually running some Blue Rose because we've got our gaming group has just gained the 13-year-old daughter of two of our group. She's got old enough to want to join in the more grown-up one, but we thought Blue Rose would be the best fit for that one. And that I've got oceans of that from Green Ronin. There's loads of adventures of that, so we're powering through. I'm a massive fan of Invisible Sun. I wish Cook would open that to community content, because I would write oceans for that. I'm always at some point I'm playing 7th Sea, which, as I say, is the best setting.
As you say,
I have never known anyone. I mean, and I don't think this is just me being an awesome GM. I'd love to think I'm an awesome GM. But I've never run the game for people and had them not fall in love with it. You know, it's like I will challenge people, say, play 7th Sea. You will love this game. It is just a wonderful thing you can jump straight in, you know what you're doing. Of course, Pendragon, as I said before, and again, it started me writing these articles about good system design, because Pendragon, I think it was John Wick, right from 7th Sea, who came up with I think the Greg Stafford law that said, if you think you've created a new exciting rules mechanic that nobody else has thought of before, check what Greg Stafford has written. You will find he thought of it first.
Oh, wow,
Pendragon is full of those things, and it's simple and it just works. And I mean, it's not 100% without its faults, but I don't think it's like on the 99.9% thing.
That's my
praise.
It
is a work of gaming genius.
There's some recommendations for you there.
Yeah, so I've got shelves of books. You know, any game or anything. I'm a big fan of Doctor Who. I've just and we've been playing Star Trek. Got through my group through the pandemic as well, so it's a great thing. And of course Dune. So yeah, there are too many games. You find yourself bouncing from one to the other, going, oh, that one's cool. Should we do that one? I have got so many games I've started and campaigns that I begin, and then we drift off into something else. And
get distracted by all the good stuff.
Yes, I mean, we've been playing with I role play with my American friend Walt Chinowski. We've written loads of Doctor Who books together, and he's a big Highlander fan. So we're running a primetime adventures where we're all Highlanders at the moment, which is really good. So, I mean, this is the wonderful thing about gaming, is that however many games you've played, and sometimes you think, I've played all of them, haven't I? And then you go, no, you haven't. But you'll always find something. You go, oh wow, this one's really cool. You know, and I even have this with, to be honest, and I will put my hand up to this one, say with My Little Pony. I don't know the new one from Renegade now, but I
Yeah,
did
that's so we talked about that on This Week in
yeah.
Tabletop the last week.
It's great because it's had the new. I wrote a little bit for the previous one, mostly because again the aforementioned 13-year-old daughter of our game, when she was very young, she would sort of be playing around when we would be gaming, and then eventually one day said, when she was I think about 6 or 7, said, "Can I play?" And we thought, not the game we're playing, because we're a little bit worried what you may have overheard actually, because if you
Not
think you're
appropriate
listening,
content, yeah.
it's a bit grown up. But but then she was a big fan of My Little Pony, as so many poor girls are, and they came out with Tales of Equestria, and I read this and I thought, this is a really good game. I love how the system design is brilliant, and so I got chatting to them and wrote the Haunting of Equestria. So I've of course it's me, so I do a horror game basically.
Yeah. But a My
But
Little Pony horror game. So
but this is the brilliant thing, and it is and I challenge any games writer to have a look at My Little Pony, because in most games you solve pretty much most adventures in role playing by in some way squishing the big baddie. You get to the end, you grab the object, or you kill the monster, or you take it from the villain, just like that. In My Little Pony, you can't really do that. In My Little Pony, usually you're going, well, we'll find why the villain is doing something bad and see if we can make friends with them. Why are they horrible about things? Well, what they're horrible about is because they didn't have any friends. So maybe if we're friends with them, they'll stop being horrible to people, and usually they are. You have to think
that.
in this way.
I made a D&D character like that, actually, who whenever she met villains, she was like, well, they just mean because they're sad inside.
Yeah.
And she actually ended up making friends with this ghoulish monster thing, which we were meant to fight. But they ended up being just a little NPC friends because we were nice.
It's how I end this horror adventure where there are these. I mean, say, stop listening if you plan to play Haunting of Equestria. But it ends where they find this small child pony, this small foal, who is kind of involved in what's going on, but they're too frightened to get involved in to face off against the big baddie. It's not about the players facing off. They have to inspire this foal to say, no, you've got to face your fears, and you've got to be the one to stand forward and say, no, this is, no big horrible monsters. I'm not going to be frightened of you anymore. And of course, once they've inspired them to, they then have to drag them away because they're like, no, let me at them. I've lost my fear now. And then the next thing is to try and drag them away, and before they get themselves hurt. So there are some wonderful ways to try and figure out different ways of how to solve adventures. I recommend everyone has a look at My Little Pony and just and see how it fits together and how you create adventures. It will challenge some of your assumptions about gaming, which you don't expect in a game for children with magical horses.
It's not what I would expect from My Little Pony. But yes, somebody was asking for the My Little Pony, which was the specific system you were talking about for My Little Pony.
It's mostly all at home. It's a very simple system. So that was one part of the joy of it, was that you could pick it up and you could give it to a 7-year-old. It's fine. It was that you have all of your skills are a number you've got to roll under, and or at least they've got a dice that you've got to roll, and then you start with your D4 to D6, D8, D12, D20, and you're given a difficulty number. And usually in a lot of systems you go, oh, if I've got a D4, there's no point in me rolling because I can't roll a 5, so what do I do? Or I've got to spend some points. But the nice thing about My Little Pony is if you roll the highest number, then you get to roll the next dice up. And if you keep doing that, potentially you could have a D4 as your skill, and you might potentially even make a difficulty of 20 if you get really, really, really lucky. It's unlikely. But I really love that aspect of there is always a possibility, there's always a chance to roll, and it's not complicated. It's not then you have to buy in points or anything. It's like, roll that. And of course, the lower the dice, the more chance it will have of rolling its highest number.
Yeah.
So you've actually got quite a good possibility of rolling a D4 and getting to roll a D6. And of course, the D6 might not roll as well. You might roll a 1 on the D6, in which case you keep the 4 that you had before. So it's just, you still read this stuff and you go, it just works. That's nice. And again, smooth, and it's a system I would have happily used for other more say more adult games. Makes it sound
More
really
adult.
bizarre.
Different
But yeah,
themes.
not quite. I've written some weird, crazy games, but not quite gone that far. But
Okay. Well, there you go. There's some recommendations. My Little Pony, is that what you expected for the person that made Dune?
Yeah.
I don't know, but there we have it. So, Andrew, thank you so much for your time and talking to us about Dune. If you are interested in learning more about Dune, I put the links where you can purchase it into the chat, and also you can learn more on the websites, which you can see on the screen, and I put on the chat there, which is modifius.net. There's a Discord channel, Modifius Official, and also Modifius has a YouTube channel that you can go to check out more information on that there. So we it's not D&D. We do this every single week. So we have another guest coming next week. So next Monday we are speaking to Banana Chan about their game Demios Academy, which is on Kickstarter now. It's got a really unique mechanic which uses colouring in as part of the system. So come and check that out and ask your questions there. Also, excitingly, so Not D&D is brought to you by EN Live, which is part of EN World, the leading tabletop news and reviews website. So also this Friday, we have our show This Week in TTRPG, which is available as a podcast. And it's just 2 minutes summarizing all the week's news. So if you want to keep up to date, you can do that. Or you can get a summary and schedule of all the shows we do at enliverpg.com. So as we have no other questions to answer, I'm going to say farewell to everybody. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming along, and I hope we can see you next week. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Bye.